Welcome to the Sanskaari Girls Podcast. I'm Vandita Morarka, and today we're exploring something that feels both urgent and constantly shifting, which is how does Gen Z construct identity and practice feminism in digital spaces? And I'm so lucky today to be joined by Ria Chopra, a writer, a recently published first time author who lives at the intersection of all of these conversations. Her work has appeared in Vogue, Vice, BuzzFeed, The Hindu, The Indian Express, Refinery 29, a personal favorite, Insider, The Quint, and many, many more places. They're also a youth advisor to Google via the research agency Canvas 8, and her multifaceted career has taken her from a leadership summit at the Google HQ in Mountain View to the hot seat of Kaun Banega Crorepati. And she writes about how larger cultural forces are shaping our individual lives, especially in her debut nonfiction novel, Never Logged Out: How the Internet Created India's Gen Z, which is recently released on the 2nd of December and it's available now to read. And I strongly, strongly recommend you pick up a copy. What makes Ria perfect for this conversation is that they're not just observing Gen Z from the outside, they're a part of it. And they're writing about internet culture while living within it, while shaping it and being shaped by it. So, Ria, welcome to the podcast. Do you want to say a quick hello before we get started?
Yes, and not a quick hello. Thank you, Vandita, for that very generous introduction. How I like to talk about my work is that it's about the experience of being human today and being a young person today, because, like you said, it's something I myself go through and then I like to write about as well. And digitality and the internet and our interaction with and in those spheres is such an essential part for many of our lives today. So that inevitably plays into the writing that I do. But I think my central focus is always the person, the people, the individual themselves. The digital world is this ecosystem that we stay in, but then what it does to us and our humanity and our interactions with each other is something that has deeply interested me my whole life. And now I get to do it as a career. And thank you so much for inviting me to this podcast. I've been bookmarking your posts for months. I bookmark all those, things to read instead of doom scrolling collections that you make. And then, like, I doom scroll quite a bit, but I do end up reading what you post. Thank you so much for the work that you do. The conversations you host here are so interesting, and I feel so grateful to get to be a part of them as well.
Thank you. That's incredibly kind. I have to say, I play a very small role. I will give a shout out to both Ishika and Anjali. Anjali, who's also on the podcast, who do a lot of the research, the bringing the content together, the design. So it really gets to an audience that perhaps otherwise would not think, engage, or spend time on these things. And that's so important as well, right? You spoke about how for you, this is just about being a person in today's times, and then what is our role to reshape that personhood and to reshape or even like guide a little bit of what it means to be human in a time when the digital is just a, it is honestly like an extension of my body. It's not something that I'm able to leave or separate from me when I exist offline. So I really love that. I'm going to start with some of that. You've also described yourself as someone who can always be found online. And I have
Yes.
discovered the most interesting nuggets by following some of the deep dives you do. And that phrase itself is so interesting, right? That not that you're just online, but you're findable there. That's where you
Yeah.
are. And what does it mean to build an identity that is so fundamentally digital? What has that meant for you?
I think it's not something I ever feel there was a point of making a conscious choice that, oh, I'm about to start making my identity online. The internet was just there, and then I was on the internet. And, my early days was spent doing my holiday homework on the internet, and I was looking up, what is igneous rock and printing out photos and pasting it in like my environmental studies notebook. Then gradually that became Google deep dives, and, I used to read Wikipedia, and there were all of these multiplayer sites when we were younger. And this is something I do trace the trajectory of in my book as well. When I talk about like my early days, I used to be on this website called Club Penguin that I used to love so much, where you used to make a little penguin. And it was just a multiplayer world, and there were all these children, everyone making penguins, and you could play games and make money and buy like a little shirt for your penguin, and you could have pets for your penguin. And it was crazy, right? And then there were all these other Cartoon Network and miniclip.com, Barbie.com. I used to be on them. And then gradually, I think that internet became the social media internet, at least my existence. And that's when you made an identity for people to find you. And earlier, it was just friends. And then at some point of time, it became followers. And now it's more followers. And it happened so fast, and yet it happened so slowly. I don't know. It's like one day looking into the mirror and realizing that your short hair is now long hair, and you don't know when it happened. And that's how it feels like for me. And I think it wasn't something I was able to predict, so foresight was not present. But in hindsight, when I look at it, I can see this journey, this trajectory, and the ways in which it has manifested in both my conscious identity creation online and how that identity influences how I live in real life, whatever real life is now, also. And my career is online now. Like I make money and I make friends and I make a living, the entirety of it in ways that were simply not possible 20, 30 years ago. And it's new, it's something that's still figuring it out. And much like I think identity is something you constantly build, this understanding of our digital self is also something that I'm just constantly building. What does it mean to be findable online? I don't know. It's something I struggle with and something I'm trying to figure out. It's nice that people can find me, but it's also horrifying that I simply can't go. And my financial stability, my friendships, my emotional stability is so connected to being findable online that all those jokes of, oh, I want to be off the grid, like those will stay jokes for me. I don't think that's really possible. And that's a bargain that was made, like Faustian, almost in the sense that wo kar liya and ab ho gaya, and this is it. So this is it pretty much.
Thanks for sharing that. I mean, a lot of what you shared has stayed with me because it's really making me think about what does it mean then for our digital selves and our personal selves to reshape as the digital changes, because it's also changing so rapidly. And when so much of our connections, our lives is in these online spaces that are not something controlled entirely by us or something that we can always say we have a right over, we're able to access. What does that mean? But I know we'll come to some of that. You said this one statement that really, I think, struck me was, it moved from at some point being friends to followers.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's been a trajectory maybe underlying that. And a lot of us might experience it, but we don't articulate it. Is that we do end up curating different versions of ourselves, right, on different platforms. In your bio says notes on internet plus Gen Z plus culture,
Yeah.
uh, whereas your LinkedIn is a lot more like professional credentials, for example. But I'm sure your WhatsApp group is neither of this, and it's much lighter. So, how do you think about this fragmentation, both across platforms and perhaps also across time, given that you've made that note of it has moved? So, how has that moved? What has that change been?
I think something to preface this question is obviously that this curation of the identity isn't just a digital phenomenon. I think most of us do it in multiple ways offline as well. The self we present at home, for instance, is not the self that we present publicly, is not the self that we present at work, is not the self that we present in a room full of people that we think are hot, and then not in a room full of people that we think are extremely smart, and then, so on and so forth. So the multiplicity of self within us and the curation of that and the decision to showcase certain traits basis the context that we're in is not a digital thing purely. I do think the fact that we now coexist in all of these worlds at the same time, like I'm posting on LinkedIn while WhatsApping a friend, while watching Instagram reels and commenting on it, I think means that we are fragmented simultaneously in ourselves. Like I can't go out of that room and revert to who I am. I can at best close the app, open another, take on that self. But the mind works differently now. Like there's all those theories of attention fragmentation and how doing so much like multitasking is breaking our attention spans, etc. So that is there. Um, I think what we do. in these specific places is, uh, and let me go like a little anecdotal here, if you'd allow me. When I think back to my early times in the social media space, Facebook was the first platform that I was on, and then Instagram. And this is 2012, 2013, when I was 12, 13 years old. So there used to be certain rules on that platform that we used to adhere to. For instance, there was this brief moment of time where we used to give people photo credits while taking photos and posting them on Instagram, right? And it's like one day someone decided to do that, and then a lot of people decided to do that, and that became the norm. And then if you don't do that, people used to comment credit question mark, question mark, question mark, and stuff. So being in a space where these public rules exist and then having to mold yourself within them is also something that is done in real life. But we've seen it happen in front of our eyes digitally. Like earlier, Instagram used to have very different rules of posting compared to what it did even 5 years ago, versus now, where something that I see is that a lot of my friends, even those with private accounts, have started posting like public figures. Like they tag the makeup brand that they used. And my chachi will have like an Instagram video like, "Hi guys," and it's, you have 100 followers. Like it becomes a conformity because you think that is what the platform demands. But I feel what is necessary in all of these spaces is a constant questioning of why we are doing what we are doing. In real life, we often do it to be acceptable and in some ways to be successful. So if we are trying to be successful online, what are we trying to do? Is, I think, a question that we need to keep asking ourselves when we construct these identities and play out these identities in general. Another experiment, psychological experiment that has sort of intrigued me ever since I heard about it when I was in ninth or 10th and studying psychology in school is Muzaffar Sharif's Robbers Cave experiment. Are you familiar with that? So it's another thing that I've quoted in my book because I find it so interesting. It's this guy Muzaffar Sharif and his team of scientists, and they want to do a study on how groups exist in society. So they take a few dozen boys, they put them in a woods, like they're camping in the woods, and they separate them into two groups where both the groups are unaware of each other's presence. Simultaneously in both groups, even though they're separate and there are no rules, like nobody has told them what to do, you just have to live there and camp there, they saw a certain kind of trajectory happening. Like one person became the leader, one person became the dependable one person becomes the person who delegates the tasks. There are certain people who are good workers, there are certain people who come up with good ideas for how to do and how to live in the woods, etc. So there's these settling into norms, and then these two groups were introduced to each other in a series of competitive games. And they were instantly so hyper competitive with each other that the scientists had to physically intervene and separate the two groups. Then they decided to do a third thing where they introduced a disaster in that forest that they were in, and the two groups had to work together to solve the natural disaster together. And then they sort of, coordinated and became like friends, whatever, and they all went home happily at the end of the experiment. उस time पे ऐसे rules नहीं exist करते थे that what you could do with children. So all of this was like happening only. But I think the study, while it did also give us proof of how like in-group, out-group works and how the self and the other and how you treat people who you don't think are like you in whatever way, competitiveness, etc. works. I think what it also shows is that you can put people into the literal wilderness and they will come up with rules. It's how you function, like norms, rules, what is the right way to do or be, etc., are things that are so deeply ingrained in us socially that I think that manifests online in whatever platform that we go on. And the second we see someone violating those norms, like there's a questioning of, oh, ye kyun kar rahe hain, etc. And you don't want to be that person who's questioned. So you conform to what is happening. This is a very, very long winded way of basically saying that when we're online, we're being constrained by the norms of the platforms as they have developed. And I think the constant questioning of that is basically what is necessary to be able to live a fuller digital and human life. Like conformity is only good when it is conscious I feel the second it becomes unconscious, it becomes bias and it becomes self-sustaining cycles of what might be toxic behavior. And I think that's what I would like to say to that question.
No, I want to say what a powerful insight, because I know you've spoken of what may seem like a lot of positive norms, but it also made me think about some of the other norms of our society, right? Which then reflect online. For example, women should not speak this way. Women should exist a certain way online. If a
Exactly.
woman talks it, not like this but like that, she's a type of woman who deserves or is someone who is okay to be harassed, right? Like, so I think there's so much power in that framing, because it shows us where these norms and rules come from. I think the way we're conditioned, it's human to want a certain sense of structure for most
Yeah.
of us.
Yeah.
It is an unlearning and a very conscious and difficult one to say, I want structure, but on my own terms. I don't
Exactly.
just want to inherit structure. Because, yes, go ahead.
I think there's also a tendency in us, specifically as women, I'll say this, of if we experience dissatisfaction with the social structures that we're in, we are conditioned to believe it is an individual flaw rather than a flaw of the structure. So if you're not the right kind of woman, or if you're rebelling against social norms, that's a you problem rather than you being able to say, I think that's a problem with the norms. And this is present digitally, yes, but I feel like socially this is present so much more, and the ability to equate these two, to understand that our behaviors online are as reflective of biases socially as our real life behavior. I think that's important in terms of just understanding the role that these digital identities are also playing in how we construct ourselves. I think another thing we've not touched upon yet, I just think is important to talk about, is also the age at which you enter the internet, but also the age, whatever age you're existing on the internet. So that's why social media platforms have age restrictions, like age guidelines to begin with. 13 mostly considered an age where you're at least safely an I, like a person, in the sense that some behavioral norms and a sense of who you are has been ingrained into you by society, and then you're able to interact online in safe ways, safer, so to say. But I feel like a 30-year-old being online is doing a lot more of identity expression versus a younger person doing a lot more identity formation also online. And it's interesting to see how age plays into the ways that we behave online as well. I think we can tell, right? Like our friends who are not as chronically online as we are, and we're like, okay, boomer, like, stuff like that. I think those distinctions are also really important, because what really are they doing differently? These, like, that's also another category of identity that just plays into how you behave, and then like what the internet does to you also changes. I think that's often overlooked, but I think equally as important in you becoming who you are.
I think that's really beautiful, because it really speaks to perhaps even a certain homogenization of thought, more echo chambers, more and more like where individual expression of identity when you're younger feels like such a rebellion, because you're being forced to have and express an identity at a stage where ideally you should be exploring who you are and not knowing who you are.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. I feel like learning is so discouraged as an adult. Like you're not in environments where, other than like skill enhancement and like learning how to code and stuff like that, just learning for the sake of learning and for the sake of perspective is not built into adult life. But one of the things I revisited during the process of my book, and it's there in the book also, is this concept of free play that was given by, I want to say, a scientist called Dr. Gray. He spoke about how it's important for children to have a safe space where they coexist with other people their age, and they will make mistakes and they will hurt each other, and everyone will together learn from that experience. This is what playgrounds used to be. This is what hobby classes at school or outside used to be. This is what children playing gully cricket together used to be. And I feel like for a period of time, this is what the multiplayer sites of the kind that I'm describing, like a club penguin or etc., also used to be. We are now on an internet where free play is just not happening. So You have a 13-year-old getting cancer. You have an 18-year-old with a viral essay being dissected by 45-year-old PhD holders, and it's insane. I do think like there's a healthy coexistence between people of all ages, and it is nice to have that cross generational interaction. But this thing of not being able to freely make mistakes, one, because people much older than you with rigid senses of identity are dissecting you, but also because your digital footprint is pretty much permanent now. So something you said at 13 will come back when you're 30, and then you'll get canceled again. Canceled as a term I hate, but like just to use it in the connotation where it's used. So I have no idea where I started talking about this, but I do want to say that absence of a safe space for children to just be themselves is also something I find very missing from the internet. And we are increasingly now going to see a generation of like iPad babies and people who are, on the internet really early. It's already happening. And what that does to them is something we will only be able to see like decades from now. And that's scary to me.
No, I agree. And if I may share a personal anecdote, I remember when I was 18 or 19, I think I wrote a very misinformed article on why reservations based on caste should not exist and why reservations should be based on economic class, right? Not only did I pitch that article, someone published it. In fact, maybe they asked me to write it. Like some of that is hazy. I wrote it. And then I was in college and it was shared as something I published. And I remember that article became a space, unfortunately, also where a lot of people from different backgrounds had to do the work of educating me. But the work of educating me was done by calling me in and by having conversations and by getting me to think about that issue differently. Because caste, as someone with an oppressor caste identity, I had never experienced and I had never understood that side of thinking and being, and that's the privilege of it. I wonder what would be different. And I remember posting a photo on Facebook and like some people liked it, but it wasn't a thing. I wonder if I made that, if I was 18 today and I made that sort of mistake, I wonder if that call out would lead to a sort of shame that would perhaps never let me learn. Or even if I learned, right, I said, no, this was wrong, I shouldn't have done it, would it make me too afraid to try again? So even if the
Yeah.
learning happened, would that be the right way? And I don't always have an answer because I know some of these things are so sensitive. Maybe, there's more work to be done at the side of the person, young or not. But I don't have an answer. But just to share that, even as someone who does work in that realm now of social justice and human rights, I have had such horrible views as a young person. I have had views that are embarrassing, that are angering to myself today, but I was allowed to have them and I was allowed to have them publicly, which meant there was a space for me to be able to relearn some of it. And I've noticed this in some of your like writing, and that's what I find also like a little special because you don't seem to shy away from being South Asian. You don't seem to shy away from the moments and things that make us us, be it the way we're cancelled, be it the things we talk about, be it what is our everyday life. And then I wonder if when we're online, I mean, I'm not Gen Z, but as Gen Z, when you're online as a South Asian, is there a lot of code switching, to change between cultural contexts? Like, do you change between like what you might post on a Twitter to what you might post on a family WhatsApp group, especially when these politics become a part of your content, right? And politics are even a part of like how you might consume a popular movie. It's not just about writing an essay about a public policy decision, but it's perhaps an essay about like a Kabir Singh like movie, right? So maybe some of that tension, I think you've been touching upon it, but it'd be nice to know more.
Hmm. I think definitely like there's no way to not have that identity of being South Asian as well as all my other identities, like being a woman, being a feminist, uh, being upper class, being of an oppressor caste, having grown up in Delhi, living in Delhi now, all of those things I think just in some way or the other do color the way my writing comes. I definitely see I wouldn't say self-censorship, but definitely a curation in how my posting also changes across platforms, mostly dependent on like which members of my family are there. I think I I'm lucky enough that my house and my immediate family is like a safe space. So there is no hiding here. And that's a privilege that I learned to recognize very later, very much later in life, because you realize that other people sometimes don't have that. But extended family to dekho, hey, so, like they're all hidden from my Instagram story. What I put on my WhatsApp story is very different. WhatsApp story also I put up once a year basis, one conventional achievement that I've made. Like once a year, I make it a point to do something that my parents can talk about at weddings. And then that's it. Like उस पे ही फिर cruise करते हैं हम अगले एक साल के लिए. I think that's definitely there. But this almost sense of surveillance is once again, I want to say, not something entirely digital. Like when I'm walking on the street in my locality, if I'm walking with my partner, if I'm walking with any man, there's a difference in how I will interact with them. Maybe I will not hug them goodbye because I know someone is watching from a balcony. Like I've just grown up here, so everyone knows everyone. It's like one of those parts. And I think like that sort of change in behavior is also something that I then experience online. And it's funny, but it's also something that we as women are very used to. Like the photos that I will post on Instagram is not the photo that will be on my WhatsApp profile picture. And then LinkedIn, so I will like have a blazer and I'll be like, like a Forbes 30 under 30 kind of person. So it's that curation is definitely there. But I think specifically for South Asians, the fact that there are certain topics that are taboo to just even be seen speaking or caring about. It's posting about women's rights, posting about LGBTQ rights. It's insane, and you see the kinds of angry conversations that happen in households about these things. Like it wanting to stick to your moral and political viewpoints can be a dangerous thing to do in places like that. And I think to have that enter your curated self online is but natural, and it happens. Like it's part of just existing. I think another thing that we should all in general be conscious of, and it's something that I thought of when I heard you talk before this. You know how it feels to have held bad opinions and then to have learned from them and to be someone else now. And you also know why people might hold certain opinions in certain ways and the processing it takes to undo them or to relearn certain good things that we lost around, along the way, etc. And I feel like if you, as someone who has undergone that process in many ways myself, and as someone who remembers how it feels, I feel like that adds a layer of sympathy and empathy to the way we engage online. And it's very surprising to me when people lack that entirely. Specifically, I want to say in a South Asian community, judging each other basis what we post when we all know that what we post is not who we are. Why we still end up doing that is a question even I constantly ask myself. Like, why? We know that we are different people online than we are offline, and yet we judge each other as if yahi ho tum, or I somehow come from a moral place of righteousness to judge you. And I think that is just something that makes the digital existence not toxic but just unpleasant in a lot of ways. And it's something I would want people to be more conscious of generally. It's yeah, like it made me think of that also.
No, I 100% agree with you. When you were speaking about code switching in these different ways, so as someone who's in South Asia, a South Asian like founder of a non-profit, of a company of any sort, I always wonder that my online self is so serious. Like my
Yep.
online self is very like proper, which means even if I have a bit of a like snarky take on something, that's the boundary of it. But nobody online who doesn't know me as a friend offline is really getting those very like what people in my life call like third standard humor. They're not getting jokes like that. They don't
Hmm.
see that I reply to most messages with like funny stickers because I hate
Love
typing
that.
to the point.
Yeah.
But
I've
of
recently
course,
acquired a cat that is doing this. Like there's a cat with a namaste emoji in front of it. So that's now my sticker for everything. I just wanted to say that. Yeah.
please send that to me after this. I'm going to add it to my favorites as well. But just these small things, and it is that like that interlinkage of the physical and the digital. Because I know that in an offline meeting, they're not going to take me seriously if I talk in the same breath about like a meme and then about a public policy or like a law that needs changing, and then that carries forward into my online space. I've also had like team members who worked with me for a while but then have hung out with me socially say you're so different, and in a good way, right? Like, because sometimes at work you're intense and serious. Yeah, so no, this really just made me think of that. So thank you for also allowing that space where I could think about. I'm doing it without knowing. I'm doing it pretty much every day, and it takes so much. And yeah, it's just become a part of, like, I think the mental cost of living, without really consciously computing for it. um, this also makes me think about, like, my initial like introduction to you was some of your writing around the pandemic. So I think in the Quint you wrote a little bit about different issues, different public policy issues at that time. But then at the same time, you also did like personality quizzes for BuzzFeed,
Yeah.
and pieces about like influencers, and the breadth of work and the interest that perhaps drives the breadth of work has been very interesting for me. I'm also aware that you have. I mean, you mentioned the psychology background, but even professionally, you've done like psych and analytics work at Accenture, the brand marketing piece at Dunzo, and I feel like some of that comes across in the cultural analysis you're speaking of right now, where there is an attempt to have a deeper understanding of not just why, like, not describing a cultural phenomenon, but trying to understand more deeply what is underlying that, and beneath that, what are our mental models, what are our codes, what are our ways of being that shape that. So I'm curious how you take that sort of thinking to such different streams of work. How do you do it? Is it actually the same skill set? A lot of our listeners read your work, so I think they'd like to learn.
Thank you. Uh, I think it's just it, it doesn't happen consciously, so I don't know how to uh, definitively answer that question, but I think it's just a manifestation of my personality, which was entirely not up to me. Like this is some nature plus nurture milke ab ye ban gaya. So I'm an extrovert, which means that I am just in general interested in people. Like I'm the kind of person who will talk to the person next to me on flights or on trains and stuff like that. I'm also nosy, so I like knowing why. And I grew up in a household where that was thankfully encouraged, like questioning and getting to the root cause of something was encouraged. And I grew up reading a lot. More recently, it has been more nonfiction, but I grew up on fiction. So I think that realization that something that happens at the beginning of the book will influence how at the end of the seventh book, Harry will end up living his life, etc. I think that ability, not just ability, but the need to understand what happened that brought us here was maybe built on those fictional narratives also. And I just enjoy it. I'm very grateful that I get to do a job that I like. And thankfully, all the jobs and all the careers that I have had has enabled me to do that. And obviously, it's a function of privilege as well. Like I can just say no to doing jobs that I don't want to do 100%. But I think the internet has enabled that as well, because you can, if you have the ability to wade through um, the discomfort that it takes to be your true self in front of people, the rewards that you will get from publicly being your true self are so immense. And it will be people finding you and meeting you as who you are. It will be conversations like this because you read my work and you thought this would be someone interesting to, talk to it's invites, it's friends, it's so much. And I am, once again, this was entirely unintentional, but I'm glad that my identity building online was truthful enough that now the rewards I get from it actually satisfy me as a person. Yeah, I've never said it like that, but I think that's a very nice place to be in. Um, and I was able to do that, and it interests me. Like academically, psychology interests me, humanities at all levels interests me. I Literature interests me because it's portraits of that period of time and what people are talking about and how people are living. I think that interest just bleeds into my work, and I'm glad it's coming across as that. Like I'm glad it's speaking the way I have been speaking through it. It's nice to know.
No, I really appreciate that that framing and insight into, because you did what you did truthfully. Now the rewards actually feel like rewards. They feel like
Yeah.
contentment, even though you keep maybe wanting different things, more things. In that moment, it feels like contentment, and I think that's a great insight for someone listening in, right? Like, I think if we're able to define for ourselves perhaps what some of that contentment would look like what's a reward you'd actually be happy with, I think it's easier to be honest with yourself. If, yeah, I think it just makes your life much easier if you're able to do that. And then I think it gives you that risk taking ability, that muscle to say, I want to try all of these things because this is what I want. And somewhere or
Hmm.
the other, this leads to that. Yeah, no, I love that. Uh,
I also think, sorry, but categorizing and what we call nicheifying online is inherently a capitalistic act in the sense that if I'm able to say, oh, I'm a Bollywood creator or I'm a fashion and lifestyle creator, and I put that in my little bio also, it means companies of that kind will find it easier to sort me into their databases, and hence I will get the kind of brand deals that I get, and like the money made off me and also by me will be, the correct commercial exchange, blah blah blah, and not being in a niche or being uh, a lot or and just all your faceted personality online is rejecting the system in some way because the system doesn't know how to categorize you. So you kind of like companies are also question mark like do we approach this person for campaigns, blah blah blah. But and this is specifically for creators, since I think like a lot of people want to be creators these days as well. If you're able to brave through that period of not having a niche and being your full self online, I just think that is the way a human being is meant to be. That is how people we know in real life see us, as a person who is both, like you said, funny and also someone who can be serious at work and who sends WhatsApp stickers. And it's uh, the existence that you lead then is much easier than how you would live eliminating facets of your personality just to be easier to consume. And it's a trade-off you make when you want to be a commercial creator, but it's one that people make too easily, I think, and it's maybe not that healthy to be doing that.
Oh, 100%. I was nodding so much when you were saying that because in the nonprofit space I work in, I feel like, and I see this today so much, that these are just threads running through all of our lives, online, offline, all sectors, because there's such a push to divide our work as nonprofits into gender, mental health, disability. But what happens if I'm a cured and disabled person, right? From a country experiencing climate change. So I think it is a severely designed capitalist project to keep breaking us up into our parts and not allowing us to be our whole selves and engage with each other with all of those like beauties, imperfections, mistakes, and really be that full person. So I think that insight is fantastic. I'm also curious how some of this has come together in your book. Your debut book, which has just come out, Never Logged Out, is about just being Gen Z and like internet culture. And to me, it just feels like such a challenging project because by the time you probably write a book, the world changes online, and what made you firstly pick a book form to record something that is so constantly changing? And then when you're writing about something like that, why do you think it's worth analyzing? What made you say that this is something that needs to be studied and needs to be understood, because it will help me and maybe others make better sense of their world?
Hmm. I think my biggest fear while writing this book was that TikTok would be unbanned in India and entirely change the social media landscape that I was talking about. And we heard murmurs of that in the last few months, and I was like, my book is going to be obsolete before it comes out. And that's crazy, right? Like the word is moving at a speed unprecedented, and writing about the internet also means trying to keep up with that speed. and trying to look beyond and see what are the things that will stay evergreen and stay important long enough for us to put down on paper. I think my desire to put all of this into a book is the fact that I've been writing about and talking about parts of the internet online. And while writing, also, I am able to tell which piece is the one that 3 years from now will also be relevant versus which is the one which is a little short term in its analysis of a certain trend or something that's just happening right now. And I feel like increasingly, because journalism is also pretty much content creation in a lot of ways at this point of time, we are moving towards that second kind of story a lot more, which is that, oh, aaj ye ho gaya, and this is what happened. Beer biceps and rebel kid got arrested. Samir Raina's show got cancelled, etc. And then there's a push to move to the next news cycle and write about the next thing that is most popular and make the next reel that will, hit a million, blah blah blah. And uh, the ability to retain all of those pieces in your head and spend a month figuring out what all of these things mean for us as human beings is lost because we just don't have the time to do that in this economy. So I think my desire was also to identify those patterns that I think have happened till now and are happening that are long lived enough for me to put down in book form and to be able to say that 5 years from now and even 10 years from now, this book will still be relevant. And it was really scary while it was happening, but I do think to a large extent, I have succeeded in at least pinpointing some of those things. Obviously, this book by nature is exclusionary, and I think that's something I had to accept while writing the book also because one, the internet is so fragmented. One person's experience is not the same as anyone else's. But my internet experience is so colored and shaped by all the fissures that shape our social experience in real life as well: gender, caste, class, uh, family structure, the place that I live, the time at which I got internet access, which then is linked back to all of these fissures, the kind of education that I was able to receive, which is also a product of caste and class, etc. So I think to accept that I was writing this book, which is only about a very specific kind of experience and is only dissecting that and hence is exclusionary of a lot of others, but to also accept that by writing this, I am at least trying to do justice to that experience. And if there are many other stories of many other experiences, we can come 1% closer to having an understanding of what being a young person on the internet is like. I don't see this as like the history of how the internet has shaped, the Indian Gen Z. I think that's a huge burden to take and not one that anyone can do justice to. And I know this is a criticism that the book will receive, and by the time this podcast comes out, probably is receiving as well, that the book is biased in its outlook because that is the only outlook I have had. Like I can't undo the way I have seen the world. Like that is it. What I can do is try to do justice to how all of that is written. And I think it's at least I put in a lot of effort into trying to be as well rounded and as unbiased, and my editor was hugely instrumental to that as well. Because I do think I still have a lot of blinders on. Like sometimes I just don't see things from the other side, and that's a constant process of trying to get better at just seeing the world as a whole sphere. But specifically social media, there are all of these, like sometimes I just spend an hour talking to my partner about one creator who has like 5 million followers and usne ye kar diya. And at the end they're like, who? Like it's possible to be known by 5 million people today, and yet two people in the same room don't know who that person is. And the internet has fragmented us all so much that discourse can sometimes feel so strong, but only in one bubble. And then you talk to someone else outside of that, and it's like, you know, like it's it's so strange, and it's doing things to us that I think we will only contend with when we are like 50. But at least the desire to do that right now was there. And that is why I think this book came about. There's a part of my book, and like this is entirely spoilers, and I'm sure my publisher will like scold me after this out. But I do want to talk about one of the chapters of my book, which is the last chapter, which talks about internet representation in Bollywood. And I'm basically posing the question about why mainstream Hindi cinema is not able to make a good internet story. And I think that question is like the problems with depicting the internet on film is also the problem with depicting the internet in any medium that is not the internet. And I've come up with a framework of like four different things, and I'll not give all of them away, but one of them is also, this Marshall McLuhan quote, which goes, the medium is the message. And I think that's so true of the internet because the medium of the internet shapes what is being said. And I think that's so true of discourse cycles today also. But even logistically, when we talk about something on the internet, the ability to hyperlink to the other thing that we are talking about, the ability to embed a video, and to know that someone who clicked on that one thing would be interested and would hence have the context of what is being spoken about. These things are absent from books or from film, and then you have to contend with the limits of that form, that I will have to put a glossary at the end because someone will read the book who doesn't know what situationship is. And uh, I think that was an interesting struggle for someone who is very chronically online. But it's, my father's reading the book right now, and the kinds of questions that he asks are so. I had a lot of questions while writing the book, but not those, the ones that he's asking me now. So it's a very form uh problem, and it is hence a vocabulary problem, and it is hence a logistics problem, and also then a thought problem. Like, which problems can I solve while writing the book? It was a very challenging and very rewarding process for me. And I have once again entirely forgotten what your question was because I've spoken for like 8 minutes. But as a process, I think the decision to write this book, I always knew the first book I would write would be an internet book. And that is a grandiose thing to say, but I don't think I would have written about anything else. I did think this book would happen a little later, maybe when I was 30, 35, 40. It happened a little earlier, but I'm glad that it did because this is then a portrait of me seeing the internet now. Maybe 10 years later, it will be a new internet, and then I'll get to write about that. And then I don't know, like maybe AI in my brain will be writing the book for me, or some crazy thing like that. So um, it's nice. It's a portrait of me. It's a portrait of people like me and a generation and our times and our society. And I think it does do at least some of that evergreen question posing and answering and pattern dissections. And I'm proud of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so happy to hear you say that. I'm sure there are so many of us who are enjoying the book and who are proud that there is such a book that exists. So thank you for writing it.
Thank you.
Um, I also feel like within your answer somewhere there was that, that element of medium and the message. And it's interesting then that the book is a medium for a story of something that's actually so online. Yeah, so really cool, interesting insights there. I'm going
Hmm.
to segue a bit and now come to some of the things that, the Sanskaari Girls Book Club is about. From like feminism to things like an exhaustion economy, because what even is feminism without conversations in care and labor? And then a little bit also about like imagining our futures, right? So I'm curious, like, how does feminism show up in Gen Z digital spaces, especially if I think about just how much Instagram feminism gets criticized, that it's just a poster, it's aesthetics, it's infographics, and there's just so much discourse about, is this substantive, is this performative, does this educate, does it just inform, is it something you scroll by? And you have over like 80K plus followers, perhaps increasing as we speak. So
Hopefully.
that's over 100%. And this just shows that, okay, you've done some of this really well, which means there is something that's speaking to the people that engage with you. So I'm curious to hear from you. Is Instagram feminism shallow, or are we just like a little snobbish about new forms of political education, or is the answer like, does it lie somewhere in between? Yeah, so we're curious to know what you think.
I think there likely is an answer to that question, but not one that I have right now because I have my own evolving relationship with my feminism and how it translates digitally, which has gone from here to there into a lot of different places. There's just few things I think about when I think about digital feminism and Instagram feminism in particular. One of which, of course, is that for whatever is said about the democratization of everything that the internet does, the internet is exclusionary by default. Like, look at the rates of access to the internet and look at specifically the divides that emerge. Like, it's the same ones: gender, caste, class, region in India. Uh, insofar as the language that conversations are held in online is also different. The references, the pop culture that we use to have those conversations online sometimes are different. Like there are entire articles about, the feminism of uh bads of Bollywood, like the female characters in bads of Bollywood. But then they're only talking about a subset who understands and gets and has access to a bads of Bollywood, which necessitates an expensive Netflix membership to access, right? And it's um all of these fissures are things that stop the democratization, I think. uh, Obviously, there are so many lovely feminist things that have happened online, and the Me Too movement being one of those, but also multiple other conversations that have been able to happen only because of the internet, not conversations that would be allowed in real life. But I think we must remember that there is a large population absent simply because they do not have access to the internet at all. And this is something I say frequently when I talk about the internet, which I talk about all the time. But it is to always remember that there is someone geographically very close to you, exactly as old as you, who got access to the internet yesterday. And in India, that is so true, seeing the amount of our population that still doesn't have internet coverage. And then to understand that these conversations are by default restricted and hence also restricted in the impact that they have on real life. That's one of those things that I try to keep in mind when I engage with my feminism online, to understand which audience I'm speaking to. Just like in the book, I think on my digital profiles as well, I've identified who the people are and what are the things that we can then talk about. Another question I struggle with quite frequently is, um, is profiting off the male gaze like a bad thing? And I feel like that's just such a constant feminist question, and one that is playing out very differently online in terms of the commodification of being a lifestyle and beauty influencer is one of the most lucrative careers that you can have in India today. And the top 1% is pulling in money that people are not going to see in their lifetimes, right? But to do that, you have to play into a very specific kind of femininity, and how you do that and how you would balance that. And what about me as an onlooker looking at that? I think that's another space of tension I see in myself. Like that's another unresolved question. I have this like bit in my book, and it's something that I see online very frequently as well, which is this I feel like there's this conversation around what are the political stances, and feminism being a political stance as well, that everyone is supposed to take online. And the conclusion I have personally come to is that you can't force sympathy or force people to talk about something that they either don't want to talk about or aren't educated enough to talk about. That's when you get misinformation. That's when you get people doing activism of this sort. Like everyone's sharing an AI image of like, all eyes on Rafah instead of actually sharing what is happening in Gaza. And I I hold that sympathy. I think personally, I'm all right if people don't talk about their feminist points of views or their political points of views, etc., online, even if you're a creator. But that is another point of tension in me. I once again don't know how right or not right it is to not speak out loud about your political identity, and then what is your responsibility as a public figure, and then who is a public figure. It's just something you have to constantly navigate. So these are all political questions as well. What I will say I try to do in terms of my feminism the most is to try to take as much of my engagement with feminism offline, because I am very conscious that online it is the platform and the platform algorithm and what is trending, etc., that is informing the kind of conversation that I'm having. So I try to read more books than articles, though I do read the articles as well. I try to meet more people in real life than online. I would prefer to go for community setups instead of being, on a WhatsApp group. Or WhatsApp group care, I think, is still a little bit of engagement unmediated by algorithms. But I stay away from algorithm determined any kind of like conversation of this sort as much as possible, because then again I think we're playing back into those bubbles that we're all in. That's my only definitive learning, which is to say that living is to be done in real life, and then all of these things should happen in real life instead of online. But I do see it as a space of learning, as a space of education, as a space of sharing that this is interesting to me, and as a way for all of us to find ourselves and have some semblance of community online. Though I think real community is offline and is built offline, and change is in the end needs to be offline as well. Like there's this thing happening these days. I don't know how much of taking names is possible, but someone is trying to normalize a slur that is frequently used against women online. And like my only takeaway from that whole situation is that that is not changing anything in how real people are living their real lives, like violence, um, oppression, all of those things are going to continue happening. And then does that mean digital movements are meaningless? I don't think so. But I think there needs to be a clear roadmap of this is what the aim is to achieve in terms of tangible difference to real life. And I find that lacking in a lot of digital spaces. And I wish that were just thought about more.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And it's interesting that you say that as well because for us, it's been such a tussle between online and offline communities. There have been lots of questions about like disability inclusion when it comes to communities that are primarily offline. And it's good to also hear and know that, okay, there's no like perfect answer, but some of the more long term relational bonds, some of that does require at least a desire to be with each other offline, even if sometimes that's not possible, right? Some of what you said, I'm also curious, right? Like if I do or practice my feminism offline, which in my case is sort of a profession, right? Like I do practice it offline. I also use digital mediums to showcase it, to
Yeah.
talk about it, and to perhaps use that as a way to influence others who I may not be engaging with directly. And it takes me to, I think, on Uncultured, you covered this, this downright tone deaf nature of marketing and failed opportunities. And you worked in this area of like brands and marketing. So
I have
when
done all the
brands,
bad things. Like that's 100% there.
so when brands do feminist marketing, be it like menstrual leave policies, diversity hiring, even what you said about, the content creator who's perhaps trying to do something with this one slur word, to me it has always felt like a marketing stunt or a publicity stunt. How much of that is real versus performance? And can other people tell the difference? And do you think there is a way for other people to tell the difference? Or would you encourage people to look in certain places so that it's a bit more real for them? Yeah.
I think the difficult part of answering this question is that it's easy for me to answer the marketing side, right? Which is that 99% of the time, what a brand is doing is for profit. The difficult part here is that a lot of people are also brands now. So then why are they doing what they're doing? And it's not something I want to put a hard and fast answer to also because I do like to consider that most people approach things from a well-intentioned perspective. And this I want to say specifically for this creator who we are like they who must not be named Tariqe mein talking about, but also anyone else. I think it's well-intentioned in the sense that it's also you inviting a lot of abuse and a lot of other things onto yourself because you feel about something strongly enough or just having that conversation strongly enough. I don't think it's a stunt in this case, but I am generally suspicious of anyone doing activism for profit reasons. And since most brands are doing it for profit reasons, I would put a question mark on that also. Like it's all the brand campaigns, all the things that you're seeing about um, menstrual leave, mental health leave. Like it's pink washing, it's green washing, it's all kinds of washing that you can think about is happening because it is these large conglomerates and companies and brands that go on to perpetuate some of the most harmful practices that we've seen. Like there are beauty brands that are riding on ad campaigns based around empowerment, and then their factory is a sweatshop in Bangladesh, and that is real of a Fenty and also like all these other the girl power brands that exist, and that's just one example. Um, I would once again say that like try to stay in the real world. Like media is more than ever headed towards like a very uh, there's this concept of Baudrillardian hyper reality. It's like everything is basically a simulation at some point of time. We're talking about ideas and ideas of ideas, and in terms of having lost all touch with tangible world at all. Like everything is just a statement and just an image. We're existing in this world that is just simulation, and I feel like to a large extent, specifically for marketing, like these are some of the smartest minds and some of the most money on the planet going into making you believe a certain thing. And it's a very meme thing to say, but like critical thinking is so important today. Like it's the ability to question what I'm seeing, how is it making me feel, and was it engineered to make me feel that way? I think is important. If there's something happening that you genuinely believe can yield real world change, like I donate to a lot of organizations that I know genuinely work uh, on ground to help people change the way they're living their lives. And I feel like that's a something I can see happen. It's a narrow way to live, maybe, but when I can't see something actually happen, I'm just suspicious of it generally, and that's how I choose to live. But I think that point about brands doing everything for profit is just it, and that's the number one rule today.
Yeah, it reminds me of this line. I don't remember who said it, but it said that it's so sad that some of the brightest minds of our times are just thinking about how do we get people to buy more,
Literally.
in different ways. Yeah, and I think that really stays with me. And increasingly, for some of the stuff you said, I think it's also so linked to like conversations and mis and disinformation, where perhaps if you're someone listening into this podcast also, and you care about feminism, perhaps you have to do the second step of due diligence. Like you don't just stop at like an Instagram post. Maybe you go read someone's like annual report.
Yeah.
You go and Google them, and just like Google saying things like modern slavery. Look up who's making their products, where is it coming from, are they violating norms that they're otherwise saying they're committing to. Maybe they're
Hmm.
hiring 500 cured people, but how many leave within like 2 months? Yeah, so I
Yeah.
think maybe that's a personal responsibility, and it's unfortunate that we're also at a time where trust and credibility in all institutions is so
All
low
time low.
that we have
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
it. But interestingly, again, there's other data that's now showing that trust in, say, civil society is lowering and trust in
Hmm.
businesses is increasing.
Trust in businesses is
Businesses is
increasing.
increasing.
That's insane.
It's lower, like trust in civil society organizations is, I think, for the first time, lower than trust in businesses that people have, which is perhaps a result of some good marketing strategies.
And a very worrying thing. Like there's this term that we use frequently when we just have conversations around culture, which is called the perma crisis. And that's this state at which a lot of young people are existing today, which is a permanent fight or flight sort of situation, because we've seen multiple like catastrophic level bad things happen in front of our eyes and institutions doing nothing about it. This conversation started around the pandemic and then post it as well, but multiple recessions, genocides happening all around the world, the rise of right-wing politics, even before that, like terrorism, Islamophobia, all of these things increasing. And we've seen governments, we've seen world organizations, all these like private companies, etc., simply fail to do anything about it, which is what, and even journalism is like a pillar, like it's entirely failed, which is what contributed to lesser trust in institutions and more trust in individuals, which was something that came about a little post pandemic. I think that drove also this rise of chotu communities that we've seen recently, like book clubs, supper clubs, baking clubs that's happening. I have seen in a lot of ways, I don't want to say all of them, but a lot of these communities have also started, maybe it's necessary, but finding ways to monetize themselves, which reduces their, I think, impact as a third space and then becomes like a little exclusionary in who gets to engage in that club and that community and those conversations. Maybe that is also leading to the change that you're speaking of. But I would say that's very worrying. Like that's not a statistic that I'd come across, and probably a result of like a very smart McKinsey like marketing campaign that has led to us all thinking that businesses are good actually.
I'm going to try and find this and maybe link it here or at least send it to you because it's been an important part of my like non Sanskaari Girls book club work to think about how do you rebuild that trust and how do you rebuild
Yep.
that credibility, because that's where a lot of the advocacy and change work happens. But it is interesting to hear you speak of these things because I have been thinking about some of this even from a lens of like health, exhaustion, care. And if
Yep.
I may, I'm going to also ask you a question about you, right? Like you've said many times that the internet should be fun. Like
Yeah.
it should, it should be a place of learning, growing, fostering relationships. But you've also had like a full time editorial role. You've co hosted a podcast, you write for multiple places, you have a very strong Instagram presence, and now you've written a book. So isn't that exhausting? Are you having fun? Yeah. So what does this look like for you?
I think there is nothing more fun or more satisfying for me than the feeling of being exhausted because of doing things that I like. I think that's a huge privilege, as I said before, that I'm able to do, but um there's never a day when I'm not grateful about it. It's like, when you have a day out where you had a lot of fun, like you went to an amusement park and you hung out with your friends and then you ate a lot. Like there's a peaceful sleep you have at the end of that day. Dreamless, but you maybe had a good dream in the middle of it. You're warm, you fell asleep the second your head touched the pillow. I think that exhaustion is so perfect, and it's nice that I think that is the sense of digital exhaustion that I also feel. But I think that's also because I have very strongly held on to my memories of having fun on the internet, and I try as much as possible to still continue doing those things. Like I still play some of those games. Like I'm still doing my crossword, and like I have a 5 year streak on some of the websites that I visit, and it's the same few friends that I talk to, and it's I think that uh, uh, the effort of building ritual into the things that were fun for me and holding on to that memory of it is possible to have fun on the internet is also why I am always a contrarian in these conversations about, oh, the internet isn't fun anymore. I think the internet isn't fun anymore because a lot of people have forgotten that this is a place to have fun and not just to make money and build brands. And uh, there's enough of us, and I think increasingly now we're talking about digital exhaustion. And I think were that channelized in a positive way, all of us coming together and seeing that it is possible to have fun on the internet. So let's do it again. I have a running Sunday game night with my friends, and we all come and play like a few games together, and we're all in different continents, but we do a quiz or we do something. And I think at moments like that, I'm going back to an hour ago, like I'm reminded of my multiplayer games days where there's all of these people from all around the world. Some people you've not even met in person, but you're having fun together. And I feel so passionately about this because I critique the internet so much, and I'm in so many internet is bad conversations. And my strongest view is that I don't think it is. I think a lot of parts of it are, and the businesses that are in it and the platforms and the algorithms, and we can continue having those conversations. But I think inherently as an environment, we retain that ability to make it fun for ourselves and hence to also try to make it fun for other people. And I don't think I do it consciously, but what I try to do, like maybe when I'm talking about something fun that I found online and like sharing trivia and like getting very excited and like posting a 3 minute reel when it would perform better if it were 1 minute. Like part of it is that I like it has to be fun for me so that it is fun for other people also. And I feel like it would be real. I have a few people that I follow and like all of my friends who I think are also trying to create that vibe. And I think we need to have more of that vibe. And it's possible. Like it's so doomer to be like, oh, internet kharab ho gaya. I think it can be fixed. And I think we can do it. And it's something I care about. And I think a lot of people care about it. And making it fun doesn't mean we're not doing important work. In fact, I sometimes think fun is the most important work. Isn't that what all struggle is for life to be fun? And it's a collective responsibility to be able to do it. But it's something I feel so strongly about.
I love that passion because I'm thinking about what the internet is meant for me.
Hmm.
Um, and apart from the tiredness, like I met my current like husband partner on Bumble, and that's a part of the internet,
Late.
right?
Yeah.
When I started my organization, I had very little like social capital, and I know I built out my networks on Facebook, um, and for me that was fun. Like it was, and it still continues to be, right? Like to be able to bridge those barriers of geography, of networks of connections to build relationships. I love that you spoke about like games that are small websites and like word games and puzzles that have been just like a accompaniment for me now for like a decade. Yeah, so there are these really special pockets of the internet, and I'm also taken back to something you were saying a little earlier about how we've now started creating small community spaces, because the larger ones perhaps also feel very dissonant, and we want to be able to find an identity marker between us and our communities that we're in. But then we're also constantly monetizing. I mean, we've struggled with the book club. We've done so many pilots, and then we've had people ask, why are you doing this again and again? Because every pilot we couldn't figure out how does this work financially, because the way it works is we charge people. But then is that what this is meant to be? Because the reason the Sanskaari Girls book club started is because the most fundamental fun thing in my very nerdy life has been reading. I
Yeah.
think reading transports me in a way that I would associate with magic. And to be able to share that love of reading and bringing that together with the political views that fuel every day for me, it's something that gives me so much joy. And you spoke of that, right? Like when and if you have the power to be able to do some of that, to script the journey of your life, then it is exhaustion, but it's a good exhaustion. So yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer, right? I still don't have a like financially sustainable model for this book club. I don't think I ever will.
Hmm.
But like, how do we do the things that give us joy, create fun spaces for us, for others, or just create like these moments of celebration, um, and not make it about money, and not make it about you can access this 2 hours of celebration or joy if you can pay 3,000 rupees, right? Like, yeah.
I, I I think I felt that while writing my book as well. Like I was so uh focused on putting so much of myself and everything that's important to me in the book. And then when the book was being printed, like price tags are being stuck on it. And I'm like, for the first time, I'm asking people to pay, to read what I have to say. And it's a difficult choice. I could just leak the PDF online, or like, we could continue to funnel our own money into doing things and make sure it's available for cheaper or for free or all of those ways. But I think the desire to make it sustainable has also driven some of the best enterprises that I have seen. Like there's a friend of mine who runs a clothing brand that she's trying to keep 100% sustainable, and there's people running like women's organizations and all these smaller like communities that I'm part of. I think uh, one of the reasons why many of them have survived is a very woo-woo thing to say, but because the founder has believed that it can. Like it starts there. Like, and I think all of these things that we are talking about, like the belief of joy is possible on the internet today, and the belief of people will read again, like even though illiteracy, not literacy, but like the way people read is at an all-time low, etc. Like just the ability to see something maybe in yourself and to feel that there must be other people like me who want to make this work. I think that belief needs to stay, and then we find the models to do what we can. And I think not all of us will succeed, and a lot of us will. And I think that in itself is a net positive.
Oh, 100%. I think a lot of little failures are good, because
Yep.
success looks different. So sometimes big failures are small successes, right? And it means like it's something good for someone. and it moves us ahead. So I think that sort of innovation is just necessary for us to reimagine, I think, even fundamentally community. And perhaps that's why communities offline feel more like real still to an extent than communities online, because increasingly, though, for me third spaces offline are also so difficult to be free, but you can still sit on a park bench and have a conversation without someone asking you to buy something, pay for something, pay for
Yep.
entry. And I really, yeah, and what you shared about your book, I have thought about it, because for you, I've seen all of your material. I've never had to pay to access
Yep.
your material, but I will be paying to buy your book.
Thank
Um,
you.
and no, of course, and that's such an interesting dichotomy,
Yep.
but it's also powerful, because it is sometimes it is building a career out of something you care about. Yeah, yeah. I
Hmm.
have two questions for you. One is maybe a broader, like, world philosophical question, right? Like, if you could change one thing about how Gen Z engages with feminism online, how we talk to each other, how we engage with critique. You've spoken a bit about like cancel culture, identity formation online, and even then how we build community, right? From monetization to sustainability. What would it be? What would you change?
I think more sympathy and less judgment, which just means a little more acceptance of the fact that not everyone's journeys look the same as yours. This is once again a question I have so much in myself, and I see it occurring in all of these conversations. Like, if feminism is done imperfectly, was it still worth it? And I think that's one we need to keep trying to evaluate. Uh, I would like to see a lot more tolerance because I still think there's like so many waves and so many more to come, like the way that you say that, like it's uh there's so much to do and that can't be done by alienating too many people. On the other hand, you still have to stay true to certain tenets because there's a point at which there's a dysmorphia that's going to happen, that what is happening is not correct. Like, choice feminism, is that pretty much, like, is that even feminism? Like that, uh, I would like to just see people engaging from a point of view of sympathy instead of immediate criminality. Strong word, but just like an immediate, you are not a feminist, or that sort of thing behavior. So I think that's, yeah, for me, that's it.
That
Specifically digitally, because I think increasingly um, it's hate gets clicked on more, it gets spread more. So maybe I just see a lot more of that. But it's a harder stance to take to critically see कि okay, ये हुआ, ये नहीं ठीक था, ये ठीक था, ये, like that sort of thing I think needs to stay. We are too quick to just be like, oh, incorrect, out,
yeah.
that sort of
No, I was on a panel recently where someone said this thing about like filmmaking, that when you are writing or like creating a villain, you have to find one thing that is lovable in that villain so that your audience can relate to that villain. They don't have to
thing. Yep.
like them, but it has to feel like a real person.
Hmm.
Um, and to me, that's also such a metaphor for what you're saying about sympathy and empathy, but also just seeing the humanity of the other person, and being willing to hold that at the center while you have all your other fights and you have your arguments and your disagreements. And that could change so much of how we do everything, from community to politics to just organizing, and just like everyday life and mental health would improve.
Yep.
My last question, which I've been asking all our guests, and a lot of our readers take a lot away from this, is I want to say three, but maybe a maximum of five, like recommendations for either people or books or like pieces of literature that someone must pick up that you strongly, strongly recommend.
I think a lot of times when I answer these questions, my answers are based on recency. Like, it's, something that I watched or read recently that just made a lot of sense to me. And something that struck me very recently, because I just watched it last night, is the Guillermo del Toro adaptation of Frankenstein on Netflix. It has Jacob Elordi as the creature, Oscar Isaac as Frankenstein himself, and obviously the source material, the Mary Shelley book, which is something I studied when I was studying literature at LSR, which was a very interesting experience of reading feminism almost as an allegory about the otherization of the female, which I still do believe is how Shelley intended it to be read. And we were reading it in an all girls college, so there was definitely like an influence of that space in how I view Frankenstein as a story. And I think the adaptation is able to hold on to a lot of that, which is interesting to me. So I would say I'm a very like multimedia person. So watch the film, read the book, read all the articles about it, watch the reels about it. I am engaging with a lot of like Twitter threads about it right now where people put like screenshots of their favorite scenes from the movies, etc. But that's like one recommendation of mine, definitely. Um, I think an all-time classic is also it's become associated with like the performative male sort of space now, but like all of Bell Hook's work, I think, is something that has deeply influenced me and that I consider uh, fundamental to just how I view positive emotions and human engagement, interhuman engagement. All About Love is obviously like the most popular one. Like the red cover is the one that I now see on all the performative meal memes, but all of her other work also I think is good. So just as an author, I'd put her there. And subscribe to Regaja's newsletter that I think is really lovely. Here Now Studies, and I know you've had her as a guest before, but I think she also brings a lot of the things that we spoke about today. Like there is a South Asianness to her work. There is also, and something that has always attracted me to her writing is this sympathy that she holds for everything that she writes about, which I think is such a powerful thing to do. I think something that I said before also, like resisting anger is a very powerful thing to be able to do today because anger is pushed onto you by multiple systems. So I think I would definitely like recommend that one of the few newsletters that I actually pay for. So that's three. I think a book that very fundamentally changed how I just uh, think of feminist works is Shrayana Bhattacharya's Desperately Seeking Shahrukh. I had the privilege of having Shrayana endorse my own book, and she read the manuscript, and that was just a lovely moment for me. But I think the innovation of using Shah Rukh Khan as like a tool, like I don't know how to say this, but he's pretty much objectified in the sense that he's made an object of study in that book by all of these people who view him as larger than life itself. So he's not really objectified. He's objectified in the opposite way of when you stop seeing a person as a person. And then to look at the economic status of women in India and the aspirations of women in India. And I think that that book is so inherently feminist, but also so fun in how it's used pop culture. Like that's one of the books that made me want to write my book the way it's written.
Love. Yeah.
And I think like very influential to just how I uh, see it. I think like just adding on to that, this is like a little narcissistic of me, but the first time I read Desperately Seeking Shahrukh, it made me think of something that made me think of something that made me think of something that made me write this one Twitter thread about my experience quizzing as a young girl in Delhi circles. It's still, I think, one of my most widely read pieces of work, and it's a Twitter thread of all things, but it's my pinned Twitter thread and it's my pinned Instagram post as well. It's just about how experienced uh, hierarchization of certain kinds of knowledge as just being valuable and pop culture not being like STEM knowledge is what's valuable. And then obviously later in life, the humanities were pushed down in favor of like sciences in particular, but also commerce. So I think like Shrayana's book just in some way pushed me to write that. So I just want to like draw that correlation, but I'm still at four. I'm gonna be like a little woo here, but I love watching a specific genre of content that I call girly pop content, which is girls just having fun being girls and being themselves. And I know I say girls in a way that's very girl math and like girl boss, and obviously like these are women also, but YouTube videos of women feeling okay enough to in very specific ways express their enjoyment about certain parts of life. And I think I also have this tendency of feeling that in some places, like everything that is, and I need to find like a better way to phrase this, but not all good things have to be serious, right? Like sometimes, which is that point of just having fun being one of the most radical things you can do. So just watching women have fun, even if it's in ways that I don't disagree with, I find myself constantly liking and like specifically engaging with those kinds of content, like women making reels of themselves dressing up in saris and going to their college farewell. Like I think it's really nice and it's great. So this is not literature, it's like specifically I think audiovisual content, but I think just retaining that joy is so important, and hence also expanding your worldview of what enjoying womanhood and being a woman in everything that it may mean, what it would look like. So I think like that's my fifth.
That is really, really beautiful because, when you gave all of these recommendations, what struck me is that each of these artists, creators, writers also seem to be people who are having a lot of fun with their work because they care so deeply, but they take themselves perhaps a little lightly, and they see the importance of igniting a little joy while being educational, while being inclusive, while, maybe inculcating sympathy, of just making life a little easier and lighter. And you see that in the being of the references and the people you've said, or the type of, the category of content you said people should consume. I really love that. Thank you, Ria. It's
Thank
been
you.
such a pleasure to have you. It's been, I mean, we've gone way over time. It's been such a rich conversation about identity, feminism, what does it mean to build a life online, and the politics associated with a lot of that. Really, thank you for helping think through, and even for me articulating, I think, a lot of my feelings about what it means to be this person at this moment in time, living in these ways online and offline.
I think the way you ask the questions also helped me put words to a lot of things that I've literally not spoken about before. And I think that it was so incredibly insightful, specifically what you said at the end. Like, I would never have made that connection had you not made. Like, it is about having fun at the end of all of it for me. And I think that's so important. And yeah, thank you. I had such a good time.
No, likewise. I think it was just so light. Even from just how we started by spending a lot of time with the setup.
Yeah.
Um, but thanks for
Oh,
bringing that energy into this space. I hope that
hmm.
anybody listening, watching, really takes away this message of caring enough about your work to have fun while you do it.
Yeah.
Because I think that in itself is a love letter to the work, to yourself, and to the world, and that's so important. So, for all our listeners, you can find Ria's work on their website, which is riachops.com. Follow them on their Instagram, which is at the rate Ria Chops, and listen to her podcast, Uncultured, wherever you get your podcasts. Their book on Gen Z is out now, and we hope you will find the time online, offline, to buy it, to read it, and talk to people about it as well. This has been the Sanskaari Girls Podcast. I'm Vandita. A big reminder to follow us on Instagram, sign up for the membership, it's free, and also subscribe to our newsletter. Again, would like to give a shout out to Anjali on production and scripting, and also Kuhu for some of the support online and for coordination. I hope you continue to keep reading, writing, and just finding new ways to make your voice heard through the written word. Thank you for being with us, Ria, and thank you for everyone
Thank
listening
you.
in.